Hello everyone, Pulse here and welcome to another episode of Delving Deep ESO. Now in today's episode we will be discussing some of the questions I received from the Q&A basket video I put out not so long ago, and due to the overall newness of the channel and honestly a lack of substantial questions, I wanted to really expand beyond the base idea of this video and combine the answering of questions along with some of the comments that I received both below the Delving Deep ESO videos and in my inbox as well. That way we can have some discussion about the game as a whole. So let's just dive right in and see what there is to actually talk about with Elder Scrolls Online. Now first up here I have listed is a comment from an LL-Sime1. First off, I want to say apologies if that's not quite how you want the name said, but that's how it looks for a YouTube name, so that's what you're gonna get. His comment is, Tesso looks great, a shame that it won't be possible to play from a first person's perspective though. It'll probably be more action-packed and arcade-like than an actual RPG. Now, I wanted to start off with this one not because it's an easy question or it's something that I can just breeze over and say go here and get proof that this exists, but rather it's because in actuality this is a misconception that a lot of people have that I would have to say they probably casually follow Elder Scrolls Online. Now, as someone who follows the games industry and gaming and just the things that I find interesting constantly, really, I honestly can't say that I can quite understand how details of this substantial nature can be missed. But considering this is such a huge selling point for Elder Scrolls Online to the Elder Scrolls fans, and this is something that is kind of a misconception among a large group of people, perhaps Zenimax needs to step it up a little bit and even take it further than they already have and show just how much emphasis they put into implementing a true first-person experience in the Elder Scrolls Online. And I feel like what's probably happening here, and I don't really know how Zenimax can combat this sort of concern in particular, but I feel like what's happening is I kind of mentioned that it's probably the casual followers of the game. They're probably just every now and then Googling Elder Scrolls Online and they're running into older interviews and articles which definitively say that there is no first-person combat because that was their stance not so long ago. And I'm not really sure how Zenimax can combat that sort of issue of people running into older articles and stuff, but I think maybe they need to really put it out there really hardcore and let people know that first person is going to be in the game to a substantial degree and will provide the Elder Scrolls fans that combat they desire. Now, if you haven't already seen and you really crave to see what Elder Scrolls Online has for first-person combat, I would definitely suggest checking out the QuakeCon gameplay video. I should have put a video annotation in the left corner there for you. Click that and it will take you right to the stage demonstration of that very gameplay, and you can see some first-person combat and along with many other things there. And if you haven't already checked out my coverage on that very gameplay as well, there should be a video in the top right corner. Click on that guy and it will take you to my opinions and some discussion based on the QuakeCon gameplay that we've seen, some of which is about the first-person combat, but it's about the whole video that we were shown there. Now, done with the shameless plugging, I promise won't do any more for the rest of the video, but let's move on to the next question here. This is from a Lynn Nexus. Now, he says, apparently a friend of mine saw an orc in a tailed race that seemed to be in a party together and claimed it was in this video, which I'm about to watch for a second time. Unfortunately, I didn't see any orcs with an Argonian or a Khajiit, and I think he's talking about the video you saw. Can you give any insight? Well, before I begin talking about this, I want to say that the video he's mentioning here is more than likely the leaked footage, which sort of included 10 to 12 minutes of gameplay and was an Argonian made in the character creator, about 2-3 minutes of that, and then him just running around talking to people, followed by a little bit of combat. There wasn't a lot there, but that's the leaked footage more than likely talked about here. For those who are actually just completely off and have no idea what I'm talking about, it's the one that has gotten that sort of notorious reputation for having the door opening and closing sound. That's the video we're talking about. But on to the actual answer here for you. Sadly, Linnexus, I don't recall seeing anything of the sort present in this leaked footage. I looked very hard at some of the lower quality stuff that I could still find, and I thought long and hard about what I had saw, and there was just nothing that closely resembles an orc paired with an Argonian or Khajiit. Now that said, there could be, like I said, I couldn't find a good quality one without too much hassle anyway, and maybe there was some silhouettes that were mixed up and I just couldn't kind of piece that together, but I can't say definitively that I seen a grouping of cross-faction nature. Now with that, we don't know 100% what the stance is from Zenimax about cross-faction grouping, especially in specific situations. The one that particularly comes to mind that we haven't heard of, especially definitive answer, is dungeons, because a long time ago they were saying yes, we would be able to group across faction, and that we would even be able to do cross group, but as I kind of mentioned during the mega server and social interactions video, it would appear that the official answer to this very question has kind of changed, and it looks to be now a definitive and unwavering no to cross-faction grouping. Now, this is usually the part where I would come to the defense of the mechanic surviving in this question, cross-faction grouping, and then I would also criticize Zenimax for their piss-poor consistency when it comes to details about their upcoming MMO. However, I can't really do that in this case because this mechanic was talked about and posted on the actual official website here. Now, they can usually get away with jumbled and mismatched answers because in interviews they can say that they misunderstood the questions or have any there's a massive number of other excuses that they can either pull out of their ass, or they can be legitimate excuses to why their questions have been so off from one another. But the problem is here, when this is on the official website, and I'm 1,000,000% positive that with especially with a company as large as Zenimax Online, which is connected to Bethesda, that they have a team of people diligently taking to the posts and making sure that answers which are given on the official website are much closer to the actual facts of what we will be receiving in terms of their product. So in a third-party situation where they can claim the article or the interview was misconstrued or misunderstood, they can't do that here because they have a bunch of other people checking their very facts to see if they're actually telling the truth here, because otherwise it'll come back to bite them in the ass even more so than a third-party interview would. So it's kind of hard to say what we will actually get, because especially in context of the dungeons, we haven't heard a definitive answer if that is still being kind of switched, or if maybe this is even something that can change or anything like that. So it's kind of hard to say. At this point I would say no, that we won't see this kind of situation where an orc will be paired with an Argonian or Khajiit while questing at all. I really don't foresee that happening because of all the information kind of is stacking against that kind of thing happening. But if anyone can point out a timestamp or better yet, a screenshot, or even better than that, and I highly doubt this exists, but if you have a sort of screen capture of the video clip for the exact moment that you can see the opposing factions meeting and doing content together, even if they're not grouped, if you can see them doing content next to each other, by all means toss it my way so that I can see it for myself. And if that does exist, if there's some definitive proof of this interaction occurring, I think that'll just definitely stir up some discussion. But until I can see that, it's hard to say one way or the other what we will actually get by the game's release, because their answers say no, but they're not definitive enough that I can say we will get them removed in all forms of content. So let me move on to the next one here. I've actually got two questions from this fellow here, a Miles Gardner. I'm going to do one now, and then I'll come back to his second question at the end here. This first bit is actually more of a comment than anything, but he says here, a problem I have with the Holy Trinity is with a healer in WoW, for instance, it's almost like you don't even play the game. You just sit back and look at the health bars on the left side of the screen and heal whoever needs help. Now, from what I heard about the ESO healing, it's that where you need to be in the action, killing and healing, and etc. Especially with dual-wielding players who could hold a sword in one hand and AoE healing spell in the other. I think this system will be really fun, but we will have to see. Now, I know I've done a fairly in-depth discussion about the Holy Trinity as a whole, but considering this is mostly a healer-centric question, I did want to talk about this, especially because the recent footage that was shown at QuakeCon kind of led me to notice some things related to the healing in the setting of a Trinity, at least how it's going to play out in the lower level areas of group PvE. Now, first off, the answer to the main question about healing, from what I could tell during the gameplay demonstration, the AoE healing that we were promised, that's supposed to be really at the forefront of how healing will work in Elder Scrolls Online, even if you're a dedicated healer. It wasn't very obvious to be occurring, but I'm going to chalk this up to being low level and an overall lack of challenge in the dungeon, mainly because it's probably low level to the point that they've out-leveled it, and they've definitely gone out of their way to make it so that they don't lose horribly. This is very typical of stage demonstrations where they nerf the hell out of the content, that way they don't look like scrubs on the stage for all the people watching. And for that reason, I feel like we probably didn't see the healing come into play as much as possible, because you see frequently what looks to be the resto staff, I would imagine their left mouse click ability to heal, which seems to be like a yellow beam of light hitting his allies. That seems to happen quite a lot during the footage, but you don't really see any casted AoE spells, and for that reason I do think that we will get it. But I'm not sure. I'm still not sure how we will get the AoE healing that we were promised. Just to make it clear, we've been promised a healing situation which will be much more fast-paced than previous MMOs, with a gameplay style which really will require situational awareness from the healer, like a traditional MMO, but will also kind of really chalk up a lot of the, let me say, success of the encounters to the allies you have there by best taking advantage of the AoE heals instead of playing this whack-a-mole style. Now, I do feel like, and this is a problem not so much maybe with their design, it could be with what they're trying to counter with AoE healing, but the problem is I do foresee a whack-a-mole kind of situation happening in some form or another, since really the player base of MMOs in particular are notorious for this. They will always find the best way to, let me say, quote-unquote, cheese the system. And even though the AoE healing is going to be more substantial and a more important part than previous MMO titles, the fact is that they will find a way to best utilize the system, and then almost always they will also utilize add-ons to really propel the healer to the best of their abilities with UI mods. So the problem is, you will probably still be playing a UI to a substantial degree. The real question comes down to this, though. Has Zenimax created a combat system, especially in terms with healing, which requires the player to stay engaged in the happenings of the world and the encounter? Because if they do, then they can pretty much, the idea is that if they've done good enough to engage you in what's actually happening on screen in terms of the encounters behind the UI, then there will be a good balance between what you play. You can use the UI mods to the best of your ability and keep them there, but if they make it tough enough and engaging enough that you cannot, it's impossible or near impossible to play just by UI, then I think they'll have done well, but only time will tell how well they've delivered on that. It's one of the things that we cannot say for certain until we see some NDA lifts or until release maybe. But there's one other thing I did want to mention before I forget here. You said something along the lines of dual wielding with the two separate abilities. Let me see, what did you actually say? A AoE healing spell in one hand and a one-handed sword. Well, the problem is, I'm sorry to say this, that as of right now, and I don't foresee this changing at all, the dual wielding sadly won't quite happen as the way you're hoping here. You will still be able to have hybrid gameplay that would normally be provided by having two separate like unconnected abilities, like you said, an AoE healing spell and a sword, but you can't hold Holy Light in one hand and a sword in the other. But you will be able to get that hybrid gameplay that you kind of are asking for there through utilization of the skill bar system. So it's not really so much as a negative, but more of a different way of handling the hybrid gameplay that we've seen in Skyrim and stuff like that. So you will still be able to get that gameplay style. In fact, you'll have more tools in your repertoire to use as you see fit with a skill bar system, but it will take a little bit getting used to, especially if you're really wanting two separate things in each of your hands. Now on to the next question here. It's from Huge L Gaming, and it's a quick question here, but has there been any info on whether or not your basic left-click attack will consume stamina or magicka, like in Oblivion, for example? I really hated how that limited me severely when it came to combat. Now, this is a quick one here, for sure. No, there has not been any mention of basic attacks using stamina or magicka, even if you spam the left mouse button quickly. Now, I wanted to mention this question because even though there is this lack of stamina usage on basic attacks, or magicka as well, if you're talking about the staves, and it seems to be a concrete design decision here that that they won't be doing this, but it could turn out, and this is mostly random conjecture based on leaks and some discussion about the interwebs and the forums and stuff like that, and some information I've seen based on the game that's now currently hidden under heavy NDA, but it seems like, and it would be massively far-fetched to expect something like this, but there may be some buff skills, maybe even ultimates or anything like that, just kind of being vague here, which could enrage you and could empower your basic attacks to the point that you become this sort of frenzied badass for a couple seconds. Maybe your hastened attack speed or attack strength, but they cost stamina for the few seconds that you are enraged. And I guess this would also apply to magicka. I would actually foresee this being a thing on maybe, I would expect a skill like this to be on maybe a dual wielding tree, but I would see maybe the opposite occurring with two-handed weapons, just to give a opposite sort of point of view here. I would also expect if this kind of skill we're talking about occurs in Elder Scrolls Online, that we would also see maybe two-handed swords get a opposite skill, which when used maybe eliminates cost of stamina or magicka on the two-handed power attacks. So I guess it would have to stick to stamina, but I don't know for sure. But I would expect to see skills like that, so you won't be severely hindered when it comes to spamming your normal left mouse button attacks, as you were concerned about. But I would expect if you do feel the need to utilize a system like that to buff yourself, I would expect skills like that to be present, mainly because they're typical in MMOs and in fantasy games as a whole, this idea of frenzied attack or power attacks or anything like that. So expect mechanics like that, but they're by no means required. So you can sigh a little bit of relief there. Now, back onto the final question I have here with Miles Gardner yet again, and he asks a very good question. With ESO coming out right now before your eyes, why do you think that Zenimax has not talked about a payment model? Also, what payment model do you think will help make the game the best it can be? I believe that a payment model similar to Guild Wars 2 would do perfectly fine, but that said... Oh god, I lost my place. It would do perfectly fine, but that said, we all know how companies are greeted these days and want to squeeze every last penny out of us. Now, this is a great question. Again, I want to make that clear. This is a good thing that we need to talk about. And it's honestly that it's something that I could spend a whole episode talking about and really going into the ins and outs of the different payment models that are possible with Elder Scrolls Online and really kind of give the pros and cons of them. Now, honestly, I don't think we know why or what payment model we're going to get, because Zenimax doesn't truly know themselves. I would expect that we don't get a subscription model, because they would have announced it by now. I think they would have said straight up that we're going to give you a subscription model, and then they would have either gone with it or taken it down, depending on player feedback. Plus, it's just not very popular anymore. Beyond that, though, I honestly think it comes down to this when it comes to how successful they will be with a payment model and how they utilize that. It's how can they turn the money they receive from their payment model into post-release content. And first up, I would have to agree that Guild Wars 2 has the most enticing model, especially as of late. It's the most popular. It's the one everyone seems to like. And Guild Wars 2 is a fantastic game. The problem is, and I kind of mentioned, is that it's how do you turn the profits into post-release content, and it comes down to what can they give us for endgame, because Guild Wars 2 is fantastic, like I said, but there's fuck all to do at the endgame. If you played MMOs at all, you realize that Guild Wars 2 is just not a game that you can spend all the time in. Now, that's perfectly fine, because ArenaNet seems to have really been going for this idea that their game allows you to jump in and jump out at your leisure, and you never feel tied down by conventional payment models or mechanics. That's great and all, but I don't feel like Zenimax should copy this very idea and steal this sort of niche market, I feel, by going all copycat. And I think they really need to really consider a nice hybrid here. I wouldn't mind seeing something along the lines of a balance of all three models, with maybe a low entry box cost. I'm thinking $20, $30 max, with a cosmetic in-game store, much along the lines of the Guild Wars 2 store. But I couldn't really see them forgoing and completely forgetting the idea of a VIP sort of system, which is usually a $5 to $10 monthly subscription fee. You go higher than that, then there's no point in having this VIP system and having the free to play. Now, I have to say I'm not really a fan of a system which utilizes all three of these together, but I do feel like if they take maybe they do the cash store and they want to do a VIP monthly subscription, I do feel like that's something that hasn't been done well before, but it could work. It's something that it could potentially provide them with the income from the store, but the VIPs, I don't really know the best way to handle those, because as I said, I've had experience with a lot of free-to-play games that utilize the system, and they're awful. They're just really massive dickheads when it comes to gating content with real-life money instead of making it all about cosmetic customization. When these two systems seem to intermingle, for whatever reason, companies gate the hell out of content, but I don't feel like that's actually the potential payment model's fault. I do feel like that's on a company by company basis. So I really feel like we'll probably get a hybrid of the models there. The one that I expect to see, though, is probably an exact replica of the Guild Wars 2 style. So I feel like that's probably what we will get, considering its popularity. But the question still remains, is that the right move? And I can't honestly say, because even though Guild Wars 2 has its sort of niche market there's not any other game that I can think of that's utilized a buy-to-play system and had substantial endgame content. Hell, there's subscription games that don't have substantial endgame content. So, like I said, it's really worrying, but only time will tell what we'll actually see here. And I really hope that they consider this when it comes to post-release content and what they need to bring in terms of profits to turn around and give us substantial content on a regular basis. And I don't mean filler shit for single players. I mean legit in-game group content, especially when it comes to PvE, but also the PvPers as well. They're going to want something to do beyond just Cyrodiil all day, so they really need to take that in consideration. But I'll stop there before I really get ranting onto how they can mess this up by not considering all the factors with a payment model. But like I said, I'll stop there, because I could really go on for days when it comes to that, which I kind of mentioned before answering the question. But guys, that's going to do it for me. This has been Pulse. I want to thank you for joining me again so much for joining me. I love it when you guys listen and really discuss with me the things I love about Elder Scrolls Online and anything else I cover on the channel. So I'd like to ask you to like, subscribe, comment down below. Click any of the video annotations I've started using now to take you to any parts of the channel. And make sure to stick to the Nova Pulse Gaming YouTube channel for everything Elder Scrolls Online and the gaming industry as a whole. Again, this has been Pulse, and I will see you next time. Bye.